Guys, welcome back again once more to my YouTube channel. It's a beautiful day. The sun is upon us. I always like to say that. So today we'll be talking about trend lines. Talking about trend lines, what they are, what they do, how they play out, how to use them, and how important they are. I'll be showing you guys how important they are to your trading success. So, without wasting much time, let's go right into the subject matter. So let's start by definition. I always like to start by definition, defining what it is, what trend line is. So I'm going to define that first. So the first thing about trend line is that, okay, there are also another form of support and resistance. Okay, unlike the conventional support and resistance, okay, like from my last video, I said I defined support and resistance as horizontal lines. They are horizontal lines, okay. Don't say horizontal, a line that goes like this. Okay, this is horizontal, and then this is vertical. Of course, just refreshing your primary school geometry. And then, so now trend lines are diagonal lines. Okay, trend lines are diagonal lines, or you call them slanted lines, that are drawn on charts, okay, to identify areas of support and resistance here. So if support and resistance are horizontal lines, okay, trend lines are vertical lines, diagonal lines, diagonal lines, okay, in this format. Okay, looking at a simple graph, of two axes, where we have the y-axis and the x-axis. Okay, so now this, our graph from our maths class. Okay, so now in between a vertical line and a horizontal line, we have a diagonal line that can come in many degrees, and many more can be drawn in between, but these are just the primary ones. So now, defining that, now how do you apply this on your chart? Let's take it straight to the charts, how we apply them on charts. Let me remove all this. So yeah. So now, the first thing about, let me say the second thing about trend line is that two things can only happen to trend lines. Okay, there are two things involved when it comes to trend lines. Okay, either we have a trend line bounce or a trend line break. It can never be more than that. Okay, so let's say we have price moving, but let's say bullish coming up. Let's say we have price moving up, down. Okay, so this is what we likely have. Okay, so these are the only two possibilities here when it comes to trend line. A trend line bounce I'm just gonna say bounce. This is another bounce, and then the other option is a breakout. Okay, so these are the only two possibilities. These are the only two possibilities. And this is as the first, this is the second possibility. A breakout. So these are the only things that can majorly appear when it comes to trend lines. Okay, so now depending on the kind of person you are, who you are in the market, the kind of strategy you've developed. Okay, there are people that the traders that only use trend line as their sole strategy according to them, and they find it profitable. Okay, while some others use it as one of the spice or one of the elements in their trading strategy. So going forward, okay, I'm going to be showing you how I apply trend lines to my trading. But for now, I'm going to show you how to draw them on your charts. So this is actually the basic concept about trend lines. Okay, like I said, you can only have two possibilities: a bounce and a breakout. So let's dive straight to the charts and see how we can identify them on charts. Okay, so now this is about trend lines. When you're drawing your trend lines, okay, mostly trend lines are usually used in trending markets. That's one thing you need to understand. They are usually used in trending markets. Okay, support and resistance can be used both in trending markets and in ranging markets or consolidating markets. But for trend lines, you usually apply them in trending markets for you to be able to identify your trend. That's what trend lines are for. Okay, so now for you to draw your trend line, the first thing you want to do is identify two troughs. Okay, two troughs, or let me say two highs or two lows. Okay, where we have a V formation. What I mean by a V, it's a V. Okay, so we call this a trough. What was the first name I called it? These are troughs, peaks. Others call them, another name for them is peak. Okay, this is also a peak. Then you can call this one a valley. So you can call this a valley. Okay, so others we call it a base. A base, that's another name for it. Yeah, a base. But look, don't allow all these terminologies to confuse you. They're all saying the same thing. Okay, potato. Okay, trough, valley, base, peak, mountain top, or nothing. But you get the general, you get the concept. Okay, so what you want to do is identify troughs, and the minimum you can identify for a start is two number peaks. Okay, so now this is the chart of the NSD CAD, okay, New Zealand dollar and Canadian dollar. So this is my daily charts. Okay, I'll let's make it a habit to start from the highest time frame, because that's how I start my analysis. Okay, so let's start from the higher time frame. I first come to the monthly to check. Okay, so if I'm going to draw my first trend line, this is what I'm gonna do. This is my first trend line. Okay, now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I said you can use trend lines to identify the direction of your trend, one, and number two, as also for entry purposes. Okay, for directional purpose and for entry purposes, depending on how you prepare your stew. Okay, so now, of course, when I say stew, I don't mainly trust stew as figurative. So now you come here, this is another trend line here from your monthly time frame. That's another trend line. Okay, and what are the two areas of touch here? Like I said, you cannot use one trough to draw a trend line. You need a minimum of 2 troughs to draw your trend line. Okay, so this is the first for the first trend line. This is the first trough, that peak, and then this is the second peak. So now there's something I really want to bring to your attention, and like I said, I've been in this industry and I've seen a lot of things. Most people like to draw the trend line using the body of the candle. Others try to use the tip of the candle. Okay, the tip of the wicks of the candle. But over time, I've come to realize that I just decide to choose. Okay, I just decide to choose that. Okay, I'm going to use the tip of the wick, and it has worked for me. Because by the time you scale down to the lower time frame, you see that this thing you are calling a wick may actually be a full body candle. Okay, on a lower time frame. So let me take this line out. Let's focus on this one first. So now, when I draw this trend line, what information have I gleaned from this now? Okay, this tells me that from the monthly time frame, this currency pair is still bearish. Okay, we may have had a lot of movement up and down, but that's how charts flow. That's how charts move. Okay. The simple definition of what is happening here is that this line is bearish, and it is moving down. That's price is heading south. Okay. So now, until this trend line, let's say from here, until this trend line is broken on the monthly time frame. Okay, I always like to emphasize the time frame because it's very critical. It's very, very critical for you to know the time frame you're dealing with. Okay, so now until this trend line is broken, all right, I'll consider these charts bearish. So watch out for this. So now this is one trend line drawn. This is another trend line that I drew earlier. Okay, so now over time you get to understand, like I said, practice is king in this market. Especially for a beginner, practice is king. Okay, you say you don't become a master in anything until you put in a minimum of about 10,000 working hours. And I think those guys are right. The person that came up with that concept is genius. So now this is another one. We have this here, and we have this example here. Okay, so now we have two trend lines here. Okay, this is the major trend line on this chart, and then this is another trend line. So now we're going to call this first one the outer trend line. Okay, outer trend line. And then we call this other one inner trend line. They all have their functions. Okay, so like I said, once in trend line helps me to do a lot is to help me identify the direction of the market. Okay, so at this point here now, for this inner trend line, okay, now price came down. After from here it came to do a bounce here and then dropped about how many pips? Dropped about almost 1,000 pips. Okay, and then it came back up here, did a little dance here, and then broke this trend line. But now this outer trend line, okay, it had a bounce here. So we had a break here and then we had a bounce here. Okay, so after the break of this trend line, okay, for the interim, okay, for the short term, we had some bearish move to this side, about 500 pips. So now in between this inner trend line and this outer trend line, I'll be bullish. Okay, and then after a bounce of this trend line, this outer trend line, it came down. Okay, we had a break here and then price keep going down. Okay, now the thing is that as you know, time progresses, I'll begin to show you how to combine trend lines and other things. Okay, so for you to be able to identify a clear direction of where your chart is going to, of where the price is going to. So now let me scale down to the weekly time frame. I'll remove all this annotation. Let's go down to the weekly time frame. So if you recall, I think, let me see if I can bring back that. Let me bring this back. Okay, so now let's scale down to the weekly time frame. Now you can see this line all coming from the monthly time frame. Okay, so now we scale down to the weekly time frame. Okay, what do you have on the weekly time frame? We have this also. This is under trend line. Okay, and here we have this to be this is what we have. And then so we have another one. You can see these 2 points here like this. That's a very powerful point. Okay, please take note of that. So now see what price did. After a bounce on this outer trend line on the monthly time frame, let me color code this so that you can have a clearer idea of what we're trying to say here. Let's use red. Is that red? Something like pink though. So now on the weekly charts, okay, now price came from here, it came down, went up, came all the way down and did this, and then continue falling, and then continue falling. Okay,